One hot night turned into a year-long affair behind my husband's back. He took everything from me. I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't think that it would continue for that long. I thought I really had everything under control. I thought that Nick would never find out. I was discreet. I was careful. I played my roles perfectly. But yet one silly mistake just ruined everything, and now I really am nothing. He took everything away from me. My name is Joy, and I'm 28 years old. I've been married to Nick for 5 years now, and I'm a stay-at-home wife. Nick and I planned, and I agreed to stay home and nurture the kids instead of working. It suited me perfectly at the time. I didn't want the stress of working in an office for a salary that was barely enough. Nick had a stable job with an income that was more than enough to fend for our family, and he was always saving up for every occasion. He had a budget plan for unforeseen circumstances, and so we never had any financial setbacks that were difficult to handle. We were perfect together. We had that spark that every new marriage had. We were so in love. Nick always couldn't wait to get back from work the first 3 years of being married so we could be together. We went on dates and we had our movie nights just like we did when we dated for a year. I thought everything was going to continue like that and we were always going to be happy, but that was just wishful thinking. You see, our relationship was only perfect because Nick was perfect. I wasn't. I was deformed. Well, I believed that I was, not physically, but on the inside. We couldn't have a child together, and that was only because of me. My body refuses to even conceive one, let alone carry it to full term. And I found out this when after 3 years of trying for a baby, we couldn't have one, and we had gone to a fertility clinic. Apparently there was some permanent damage to my womb, and I couldn't conceive because of an abortion I did when I was still in the university. I was so sad and unhappy because I knew just how much Nick wanted a huge family to replace the emptiness that came with being an only child to his parents. He had always talked about having his team of 3 girls and perhaps a boy or 2, and I always was smiling and helping him dream those dreams. But discovering I was the problem and that the dream would never come to pass because of me, I was shattered. And even though Nick tried everything to encourage me and show me that he loved me enough to forsake his dreams of having kids, I just wouldn't listen. And I just started to self-sabotage. I became a horrible wife to Nick. I was always checking through his phone and every chats of his. I wanted to know if he was discussing his dreams with another woman. I wanted to know if he was cheating on me. I even went as far as blocking off some women, even though I knew they meant nothing to Nick. I just couldn't get myself to believe that Nick would just stop wanting kids for my sake. I monitored his movements and we started having fights which ended up with me in tears and Nick trying to persuade me that he wasn't cheating on me and never will. I never believed him. I felt that he had every right to cheat, but the thought of him cheating also made me want to go so crazy and I couldn't just bear it. Instead of focusing on being a good wife and an irreplaceable one, I became a nightmare. The fights and the constant niggling and arguments made Nick so tired and he just stopped coming home. He did come home, but on the days he showed up and I picked up a fight with him, he went right back out and stayed at his office instead of at home with me. He took on more workload than was necessary because he wanted to avoid arguing with me. Instead of that, to just wake me up, I felt like he was giving up on our marriage. I felt inadequate, like I wasn't enough and could never be because I was incomplete as a woman. And the only way I thought I could drown my sorrow was drinking. I started drinking in the house. Nobody could see me anyway, and I could sleep off anywhere without bothering that I could wake up in a strange place that I didn't recognize all because I was too drunk to get home. I drank and drank, but it still didn't quench that feeling of emptiness, of being on the verge of losing my marriage. So I started going out to drink. It was at first with friends, but then eventually I started going out on my own because of how I felt they would judge me if they saw how heavily I drank now. To them, I had a perfect life, one they envied and wished badly for, and I didn't want to change that opinion of theirs, so I told them nothing about my struggles. It was at a club I had visited for the first time that I met Jay. I was all by myself drinking as usual, trying to drown my sorrow in the bottle while watching people dance, and Jay had approached me. Instead of the usual, "Could I buy you a drink?" Or "What's a pretty lady like you doing all alone?" Questions that I receive almost all the time, and that I had already had an already made answer for, Jay had just sat quietly beside me and sipped his drink. We said nothing to each other as we sat in complete silence. It felt comfortable, almost like we understood that each one had their own demon to fight. When his drink finished, I ordered him another just to prevent him from leaving, as he had planned to do. I liked his presence. It felt really peaceful, and when we started talking, he didn't say much, just let me say my piece. The drink let my tongue loose, and before an hour passed successfully, Jay already knew my life history. Even though I somehow managed to keep the fact that I was married to myself, I told him everything else. Jay just listened to me, and when I leaned across the table to kiss him lightly on the lips, he said nothing, just smiled. It encouraged me to do even more. By the end of that night, I was giggling so hard and uncontrollably, the drink too intoxicating and leaving me feeling rather tipsy, but still conscious of where I was and who I was with. Jay was obviously not as drunk as I was, but he allowed me to do the things I was doing, which was pulling his jacket and kissing his neck and cheek countless times. I remember Jay suggesting that we leave the club, and me agreeing with him. His house wasn't very far from the club, so we walked to his place. Immediately we got in, Jay started kissing me and removing my dress. I just allowed him to take charge. I liked how he just seemed so in control, and I left everything to him, including controlling my position while we had sex. I fell asleep almost immediately after we had sex, and I don't know what happened after that because I just blacked out, and when I woke up, for the first time since I started going out to have drinks on my own, I was not at my house. I was in someone else's house, and naked too. I remember Jay walking into the room with a cup of hot coffee in his hand and handing it to me. I just sat there on the bed with the blanket around me, panicking. I quickly stood up, gathered and wore my things while explaining to Jay that I wasn't that sort of woman and that everything that happened could never happen again. Jay said nothing and just watched me leave without a word. After that day, I didn't go back to that club for a week. It took me a week before I stopped resisting the devil to go search for Jay, hoping he didn't stop clubbing there. And the devil that drove me there was curiosity. I was so curious, and I wanted to find out why sex with Jay, another man who wasn't my husband, had been that good. I wanted to know if I actually enjoyed it or if the ache I felt the next day after I woke up at Jay's place was just from being drunk and not sexual pleasure. Even though I was awake through the whole thing, I felt like I wanted to get one more experience to confirm what I felt that night. It didn't help matters that Nick and I had another argument that morning. He was traveling again for work purposes and would be back after 3 weeks, and I kept insisting that it wasn't work. I felt like he was looking for some excuse to go see a woman, and when I said that out loud to Nick, he had been so livid and had packed a bag and left the house that day, even though his flight was the next day. I wanted to feel good, and alcohol definitely didn't do it for me that day. I just found myself wondering about Jay again and about our first night together. So I went to that club to search for him, and I did find him. I found Jay sitting by the bar sipping his drink while watching people in the club do their thing. I sat beside him and told him that I was sorry for the last time, and I told him that I wanted a repeat of it too, but this time on my terms. Nick wasn't home, so I brought Jay back with me to the house. I didn't want to have to go to his tiny apartment because of how much I hated little spaces, so I brought him over to my house. We had sex all night, and just like the first time, it was so different from what I had always been used to. Nick had always been a gentle lover. It didn't matter to him that I wasn't even a virgin when we met. Whenever we made love each time, he treated me like some virgin that was just having sex for the first time, always asking repeatedly if I'm all right. And then there was the foreplay. Nick always made sure that I was very ready with all the teasing and little kisses and other things he would do before we actually had sex. And instead of pleasing me, it always ended up sexually frustrating me and making me impatient. I wanted fast and hard, and I never even knew that until I met Jay. There was no gentleness from the way Jay handled me. He didn't waste his time with foreplay either. He treated me almost like a maid who did something offensive to her master and needed punishment. The rough way he bent me over the hard frame of the bed, not minding that the wood was sticking to my stomach because of how hard he was handling me. But for some weird reason, I liked it. I liked every bit of it. Instead of feeling guilty and horrible from being treated that way, I felt pleasure. I had never had that type of sex before, and it was just so new to me, and I was just enjoying far too much. At that moment, I wasn't even thinking of Nick at all. All that I cared about was how Jay made me feel. After that one time, Jay actually allowed us to use the bed for the second time, and then the shower, and then the bedroom floor, and eventually the kitchen floor that morning before he left. It was only after he left and I checked my phone that I saw that Nick had called me repeatedly last night while I was in our bed with another man. I pushed down the feeling of guilt, and I ignored his call. I didn't want to regret what I did. It felt good. My body thought so I forced my mind to think that too. What Nick didn't know couldn't hurt him, right? So I convinced myself that I was just having a bit of fun. My affair with Jay blossomed after that. The crazy thing was, Jay knew I only wanted sex from him. He knew that I was obviously married because he had seen my wedding ring on my finger and also my wedding portrait picture on the wall in the living room before leaving that morning. But it was either that he didn't care that I was actually married, or he just enjoyed our sex too because he kept coming back for more. Well, it was more like I was the one making him come back. Jay was one secretive individual. He didn't say much, and after we had sex, he would just turn away and sleep. No cuddles or kisses on the forehead, and commending my efforts of making us have a good time like Nick would do. In fact, we barely spoke at all. All we did whenever we did see was just to have sex. I didn't even have his number until after nearly 2 months. I had to go to the club whenever I wanted to see him. It was almost like he lived in the club, and I would have believed it if I hadn't been to his house that one time we first had sex. And I thought it was cute at first, because sometimes we didn't even make it to my house before we did our usual, and the fact that he didn't want more from me made it very nice to deal with it. No messy situation, and that was all that mattered to me. But eventually it became risky for me when I nearly got caught leaving with Jay. One time I went to the club to get him. My husband's niece, who I hadn't even known was in town, saw me at the bar, and then she saw me leaving and ran after me to say hi. Thankfully, Jay had forgotten his phone and had gone back inside instead of actually leaving with me. I only kept praying he didn't come out or talk to me. I had lied to her that I came with my friends, but that they all abandoned me when they got their partners. She believed me, and luckily Jay had seen us together, so he didn't approach me and had gone in a different direction. I didn't have his number, and I was scared to go back into the club after the whole situation with Nick's cousin, so I went home and I slept alone instead of with Jay. He didn't show up because he probably thought I was leaving with my acquaintance, and because of that, I was determined to have his number. So I collected Jay's number so we could communicate any time instead of having to meet at the club each time I needed to see him. Jay made the whole thing fascinating, and with each day and week that passed, I felt myself getting even more intrigued by Jay. He was a great lover. He obviously knew his way around a woman, leaving me very satisfied and yet craving more each time we met. And there was the fact that his personality was so mysterious that it had me really curious. I knew I wasn't the only woman that Jay was sleeping with, though. It was obvious from the way his phone would ring, and he would ignore it or even switch it off. I couldn't ask him about it, though. I didn't have any rights, and Jay never asked me any questions, so I couldn't ask him either. I only knew that he was always in the club. I didn't even find out that he had a family until we had been together for almost 6 months. He didn't tell me. I found out when he left his phone on my bed after we had sex that morning and he went to take a shower. He forgot to lock it when he used it, so I took advantage of that and I checked through his phone. It was only then I saw a picture of his wife and his kids. 2 kids, a boy and a girl. I pretended not to know, though. When he came back out, I was lying the opposite direction with his phone on the exact spot he left it, and when he kissed me goodbye, I clung to him like I always did, and asked him if he was coming around that weekend, because I knew that Nick was coming back home for a day and then traveling again throughout that weekend. I thought that if Jay knew I found out about his family, he would stop sleeping with me, so I maintained silence and even continued to give him money when he asked, knowing fully well that he was sending that money to his family. I only wanted one thing from him, and that was sex, the one I felt I was starved of in my relationship with Nick, even though I knew instinctively that I was the one pushing Nick away. I knew that he was only staying away that much because I always fought with him anytime he was around. I was either nagging or accusing him of something, but in my delusions, I had convinced myself otherwise. It was him being the reason for me seeking attention outside our marriage. It was all his fault. One time, for a whole month, I managed to convince myself that Nick was the one with the problem, and not me. He was the reason we couldn't have babies, and he just had planned with the doctor to give me that result. I believed that strongly until I had gone to a different clinic and got the exact same result. And the reason I convinced myself of to validate my affair was because Nick was definitely cheating on me. The gap between us just grew wider and wider until it was just so choking. I love Nick very much and I was desperate for him to just pay attention to me. But that wasn't happening, and the more desperate I was for Nick, the more I sought after Jay. But a secret can never remain a secret forever. It was bound to be opened, and mine had been in the most dramatic and horrifying way possible. Despite the fights and arguments with Nick, I still was able to keep the affair out of his sight, and for a whole year he never suspected anything. Our wedding anniversary was coming up, and Nick suggested we do something special instead of fighting. He wanted us to go on a week's trip, and I was excited. I was happy that Nick was finally paying attention to me, so when he gave me money to shop, I overdid it. I wanted to leave nothing untouched. I wanted Nick to finally realize what he had been missing. I bought lingerie and stockings. I Googled the place we were going to check for the fun activities that we could partake in as a couple, and I checked some places on my list, hoping to have so much fun. But that trip turned out to be the most horrible one in my life, because it was on that same trip that Nick found out about Jay. Nick was supposed to leave with me, but he had urgent business to take care of, and had asked me to leave without him. He was going to join me after a day, and I was pissed by it. I felt like he could have easily abandoned the work and stuck to his promise of us having fun without any distractions that week. But I was there in that magnificent hotel alone without Nick, and I was bored. None of the things I wanted to do when we got there would be fun with just a person, so I had to just stick to lying around in the hotel room with nothing to do. So a ridiculous idea came to my head, and before I could think it through whether or not it was a good idea, I did it. I took out one of the lingerie I bought, and I wore it, and took a sexy picture with my phone, and I had sent it to Jay. Jay had sent me some comments that left me giggling and wanting to tease him some more, so I wore 2 more, took the pictures, and sent them to him. I even sent him one of me completely naked. I slept off after that and woke up to see Nick in the room. It was late already, and he must have traveled immediately. He finished his meeting instead of waiting till the next day. I was touched by the gesture, and instead of him resting, he took me out to dinner, and it was really nice. We recounted past memories while we were dating, and we laughed so hard at most memories. Nick was making promises to try harder for us, and also swore that he loved only me and had never cheated on me. I believed him, but it meant that the guilt that I was always trying to kick out of my mind was heavy. But I managed to ignore it and smile throughout without betraying what I was feeling. I planned to end everything with Jay when we got back home. I finally had what I have always wanted, and I didn't want to ruin it. But that didn't happen because Nick found out the next morning. I was still asleep, exhausted from all the lovemaking we had done that night after getting back from dinner. I slept happily and satisfied, and Nick had slept right beside me, cuddling and kissing me goodnight. It was perfect until that little bubble of happiness burst when I opened my eyes to something snatching on the floor. I was so scared, and when I finally realized what the noise was, I was totally shocked. Nick was standing angrily by the bed, and on the ground in front of Nick was my phone, or what was left of it. It was obvious from the look on his face that he had seen those photos and perhaps the messages between Jay and I that I forgot to delete. Usually I was always careful. I knew that Nick knew my passwords, and changing it would arouse suspicion, so I never changed it, but I always made sure to get rid of any evidence of my affair. But I forgot. I stupidly forgot to get rid of the chats and the pictures before I slept off. I was horrified, and I tried explaining to Nick even though I knew I had no excuse. But Nick wasn't even listening to me. He went into the bathroom, locked himself in, and took a shower. By the time he was out, he was calm. He calmly took out his clothes from his suitcase, which he hadn't unpacked, and he wore it and then carried all of his luggages and left me there. He said nothing to me even though I kept trying to speak to him, to explain why and how. He just left me there like that. I packed my bags too, but I was too scared to go home. I wanted to give it a day or two before I went back, hoping that Nick would be calm enough for me to apologize. Although I kept texting him to apologize, I never got a response. That evening, one of the workers of the hotel told me that the person who paid for the room had canceled the reservation for the room and only paid for 2 days instead, and so I had to leave or pay for an extra day if I wanted to stay in. I was shocked. I knew that Nick was still angry, but I didn't think he would ever do something like that. I left the hotel the next day and went back home by road. Nick was paying for my flight back home, and I obviously couldn't call him to book me a flight back home, so I had to gather up the money I had to travel back. When I got home, Nick wasn't home, and he didn't come home until the next day in the afternoon. The first shocking thing that happened was that I couldn't find my things. All my clothes and accessories were missing from our room. I only had the clothes I took with me for our trip with me. The rest were gone. I checked every room in the house and I couldn't find them. Nick's clothes were, however, still there in our room. I thought that Nick must have moved them out of anger, so I waited anxiously for him to get back. When he did and I tried to talk to him, he ignored me and just went into our room and locked me out. When Nick finally came out of the room, he told me that he was filing for a divorce and that he wanted me out of his house. He also told me that I must not have known because he smashed my phone, but everyone is already aware of what I did. He told me that he sent screenshots of my chats and my pictures to my parents and also to our friends. He told me that he wants nothing more than to see my lover, and I ruined. He had apparently also somehow within those 2 days gotten in contact with Jay's wife, and he had sent those screenshots to her too. I was so shocked and I just started crying. I didn't know that Nick would ever go to that extent just to get revenge. Instead of being moved by my tears, Nick just cruelly asked me for his card that he gave me when we got married, so I could buy anything I wanted instead of having to call him all the time. When he got the card, he told me I had the rest of the day to move out, and since my clothes were quite limited as he had burnt the rest of them, he was sure I would be able to move out within an hour. I couldn't believe my ears. It was almost like Nick wasn't the same person I had married. He felt different. He even looked at me differently. His eyes didn't shine with love as they once did. It was filled with hatred and disgust for me. Nick, who couldn't stand my tears before, just walked past me and out of the house and then drove off, not minding the fact that I was on the floor crying so hard. I was scared to leave. I didn't have anywhere else to go to. If Nick was speaking the truth, as I knew he really was, then my parents will never speak to me again. I was at a crossroad and I didn't have anything or anyone to turn to. Everyone was now aware of my dirty secret. There was no place to hide. Nick has stripped me of everything I know, including himself. Thankfully, I had some money I saved up before we got married, and I never used it because there was no need to. I was able to get myself a cheap room, a new phone, and some cheap dresses. As I had already guessed, immediately I dialed my mother's number, and she found out it was me. She ended the call without even hearing me out. I didn't even try my dad's, knowing just how strict he was growing up. I was a castaway. I am a castaway because of what I did. All my friends avoided me too. It didn't matter that the place I rented was quite close to their own. They've ignored me completely. It's been a whole week and it has just been dreadful. I keep going back to the house to talk to Nick, but he wouldn't pay any attention to me. He hates me and it shows in every action of his. It's been a week and I still cannot face the fact that I've completely ruined my relationship with Nick. I still want to believe and cling to that hope desperately that Nick and I will get back together again. That's why I'm here, hoping that even though I get judged for my wrong choices, I will still get some sort of help from somebody or anyone who will understand that I know I messed up, but I want to fix things so desperately. Please, guys, what can I do? What should I do to make Nick forgive me and not hate me this much? How can I forgive myself for this mess that I've made? How can I just get back the life I've always known? Update. Hello, Reddits. It's been a long while. It's almost shocking that 2 months have just barely passed. It feels like a whole year has gone already. I feel so awful, and it's almost like the feeling keeps growing day by day instead of reducing. It definitely isn't true what they said about time healing wounds, because the more time goes, the harder it is for me to just exist. When I first came here with the hopes that I might get some answers, the one that I hoped and craved so desperately, I didn't know that I was only going to get the opposite. The hatred from you guys is just so unbearable and unbelievable. I realized that asking you guys how I can forgive myself was the wrongest question, because there's no forgiving me for what I did. I don't deserve it, and I never will. Nick is right to hate me this much. The divorce papers that are signed and permanently sealed, the evidence of that fact. I know that everyone here also hates me, and it's quite obvious from your cruel comments. The mean words you guys just left under my post has left me spiraling fast into depression. Your words were enough to wake me up from any sort of delusions I had that Nick and I can ever get back together again. You've managed to dash all of my hopes and left me feeling horrible, totally and absolutely horrible. It still feels almost unnatural to exist without Nick, to wake up to an almost empty room with nothing except my luggage to keep me company, not having anyone checking on me to see if I'm all right or if I need anything, someone to buy me gifts every time he comes home from a trip. I should have appreciated Nick. He never blamed me for our childlessness, despite knowing it's all my fault for having a bad past. He didn't even question me or make me feel inadequate. He never mentioned kids after finding out about my problem. I did that all on my own. I ruined our marriage all on my own, and I regret it so much. I regret ever thinking that cheating was the way, when I should have tried to keep Nick from finding joy in his job rather than being with me. I argued, I screamed, I fought, and I accused him wrongly just to make up for my own inadequacy. I feel so stupid for everything I've done. The so-called satisfaction I got outside my marriage has now not just ruined my life, but also stayed as far away as possible since Nick found out. Jay has not called or tried to reach me since then. I haven't even seen him either. He probably has had a falling out with his wife too. Perhaps they are not together anymore, just like Nick and I. But he wouldn't call me or text me. He probably blames me for ruining his relationship, just as much as I blame myself for ever ruining my relationship with Nick, for something as silly as an affair that never had the potential of becoming anything more than a disaster. I wish I hadn't risked it all for this. I really wished that I never have to be here, wishing and regretting when I could have had a life of beautiful promises. I keep remembering the day Nick found out, the look on his face that day, and then the look on his face that day when he told me how well he had destroyed my life within 2 days, the mixture of disgust and anger in his eyes, the obvious hatred that shone through his every movement. I keep remembering it all, and it just hurts. The loneliness is the worst part of it all, and there is the emptiness that comes with it too. Sitting all alone in this room with no comfort whatsoever, either from online or from the people that once adored me. My friends and my family have all abandoned me. None of them would pick my calls or return them. Nick has totally blocked me off from contacting him. It's clear where I stand with him. I cannot even talk to anyone knowing what their response would be if they found out about what I did. Not that everyone hasn't already found out. The news of my affair traveled fast, and now everyone thinks I'm just a sex worker who had the opportunity to marry a good man, but still let him slip. Somehow, everyone has also found out about my inability to give birth, and it all just adds up to the spite. It's so awful walking in the street and having people whisper not so silently about you and making you feel even more bad than you already will always feel. I know that this is a punishment for me. I lost Nick, and this will forever be my story. This pain seems endless. This painful burn in my heart that seems to go on forever. This sorrow that seems like it's a daily part of my life now. I wish I had done better, and I know that no matter how much I wish for it, I will never go back to my life before. This is my new normal, this awful pain. I will forever be remembered by everyone and by myself as a person who let go of a lifetime of happiness for some months of pleasure that wasn't worth it at all. I will forever bear this pain of losing the most important person in my life. I hope that no one ends like me. I hope you guys, regardless of how much you hate me, you'd learn 1 or 2 things from, and if nothing at all, don't you ever try to have an affair or blame your spouse like I did for things that were definitely only your fault. Thanks and goodbye.